Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. This time I'm going to be looking at one of the most requested vehicles, and that is a preview from patch 9.10 of the Tier 10 Japanese heavy tank, that is the Type 5 Heavy. The Type 5 Heavy is taller than the mouse, it's longer than the mouse, but it's not quite as heavy as the mouse. So if you want to pick up a gargantuan tank, then look no further than this absolute monstrosity. Stay tuned for gameplay coming right up after I give a rundown of the vehicle in the garage, and if you have no interest in purchasing one of these, well then hang around anyway and I'll show you how to effectively take them out on the battlefield when they arrive in patch 9.10. So the Type 5 Heavy has got the second highest hit points in the game, 2,800 hit points. That's 200 less than a mouse, but that's 100 more than the other Tier 10 German heavy tank, the E100. It does weigh 20 tons more than the E100, and when you look at the profiles side by side, you quickly realize that this thing is going to be pushing E100s around. Weighing in at over 152 tons when you have this tank fully equipped, it has a 1,200 horsepower engine, and that's not very impressive considering the weight of the vehicle. And that means that the Type 5 Heavy has a sub 8 specific power ratio, i.e. its engine power divided by the weight, whereas the mouse has a specific power of 9.16. And so that means that the Type 5 Heavy is going to be slower to accelerate than the mouse is. However, the mouse very frequently caps out at its top speed limit of 20 kilometers an hour, especially along the flat. That's something that the Type 5 Heavy isn't going to be limited to, and that's because its top speed limit is 25 kilometers an hour. And that extra 20% top speed limit is going to come in very handy indeed. That's one of the most frustrating things about the mouse, is that it's unable to get around, especially towards the end of the game, where you really want to start cleaning up and chasing down your opponents. Another advantage of the Type 5 Heavy is the traverse speed, which is 22 degrees a second. That is the same as the E100, I believe. Yes, the same. Here we go, 22 degrees a second traverse speed on the E100 as well. And that is 7 degrees a second better than the mouse. And when we compare the Type 5 Heavy's ground resistances to the mouse, we can see that they are slightly better, at least on medium and soft terrain, making the Type 5 Heavy at least more maneuverable. However, one thing that's very disappointing for me about the Type 5 Heavy is the speed limit backwards. It's 10 kilometers an hour. And that makes it painfully slow once you've gone out round a corner, taken your shot, to pull back, hopefully before they're able to maybe snap a shot into your tracks. And that's something the mouse does very well indeed. It can go backwards at 15 kilometers an hour, and often that prevents enemies from flanking your tank, which feels very easy to do against a Type 5 Heavy. And now on to the main aspect of the Type 5 Heavy, and that is the armor. It's got 260 millimeters of armor at the front, 140 on the side of the hull, and 150 at the back. And the turret is a whopping 260, 210, and 200 millimeters on the back. And so although in the garage it tells us there's 260 millimeters on the front of the hull and the front of the turret of this tank, we find that these parts are only here on the lower plate, the mid plate, and the turret goes from actually 280 to 260 outside of that. Now the number one weak point on the Type 5 Heavy is the cupola. It's only 210 millimeters thick, but it's actually quite well angled, so if you want to penetrate it, you want to hit it as close to the center as possible. Because obviously if you hit it on the left or the right of the cupola, it's going to increase the effective angling very well indeed. And so realistically, to get through the front of a Type 5 Heavy, you have to have 260 penetration to have a 50-50 chance of going through it. And if he angles at the most effective way, then he's actually going to have 300 millimeters of penetration all the way across the front of his tank. When we look at the side armor, obviously if you can get the side, then you only have to have 140 millimeters to be able to get through here. With regards to spaced armor on the side of the Type 5 Heavy, we can see there's a sheet that runs over the tracks here of 35 millimeters, and then the tracks actually count as 50 millimeters of spaced armor. So if you shoot quite low, where you have to go through the side and also the tracks, you're going to have to be going through 200 millimeters, up to 275 millimeters on the side of the spaced armor. So shoot above it and shoot the hull, and that's going to be your key to going into this tank. Next, of course, if you do manage to get the back of this vehicle, then you are going to need 150 millimeters of penetration to be able to get through it. So if you're angling the Type 5 Heavy, I believe this is the most effective way to do that, because that still makes the side of your tank 300 millimeters effective, while making also the front, including the lower plate, 300 to 330 millimeters of effective. But there is one problem with doing this, and that is these 210 millimeter cheeks here. If I turn this to live, this is a very, very clever system that they've got on Tanks GG, which shows you how the armor changes in thickness depending on what angle you're engaging it from. And so if he over-angles his side armor, then you can easily penetrate here. This is going to be a little bit thicker, but still only 230. But if he angles his tank too much to the front, then the lower plate with a premium round might be your best way to get through it. However, if he angles his tank like this, then that makes the front very thick indeed, and also makes the side very thick, up to 300 millimeters of all these areas of the tank. But that makes these cheeks here actually quite thin. The majority of tier 8 heavies are going to be able to get through this part of the armor, possibly 50 to 60% of the time. And tier 9 heavies are going to get through this maybe 80% of the time. And so if you're playing a type 5 heavy, what I recommend that you do is you try and come around a corner, hiding this by turning your turret possibly like this, not exposing your cheeks, and then the enemies are going to probably bounce off your front, needing 300 plus millimeters of penetration to get through it. Or ideally, if you're coming around the opposite corner, where you're not even going to have to expose your cupola, that is going to be a very strong tank coming around the corner. And the only weakness that you do open up here is they might be able to sneak a shot into this side armor here, but if they miss, they're still going to have upwards of 300 millimeters of penetration to 400 millimeters of penetration to detrack you and take you out that way. And that is the most effective way, at least in my opinion so far, to tank with the Type 5 Heavy. So what about its gun, you might be asking? Well, it gets a very interesting 140mm gun. This thing is capable of punching absolutely gigantic holes in you. It fires 3.39 rounds a minute with 249mm of penetration with its standard rounds and 282mm of penetration with its premium rounds. However, I hasten to add that its premium rounds are armor piercing rather than APCR, which means they do actually get that full 5 degrees of normalization, whereas an APCR round will only get 3, and a heat round won't get any normalization at all. If you're so inclined, you can also fire high explosive rounds with this large caliber gun. They've got 70mm of penetration, doing upwards of 770 damage if you manage to penetrate the target. Now, even though the rate of fire is 3.39, the alpha damage is 600, which is 110 better than the mouse, but 150 lower than the E100. And the accuracy is 0.4 and the aim time is 2.5, which is pretty nice indeed. Let's see how this gun stacks up to the gun of the mouse and the gun of the E100. So the rate of fire of the Type 5 Heavy is worse than the mouse, but its DPM, i.e. its damage per minute, is actually slightly better, 3% better DPM than the mouse. But as we mentioned in the garage, its aim time is longer than the mouse, its accuracy is slightly worse than the mouse, and it is going to get more dispersion when moving, when turning the turret, etc, etc. One thing that is nice, however, is this tank gets 10 degrees of gun depression, and thank goodness it does considering how tall it is, whereas the mouse only gets 8. Which means when you do get this tank, hold down over a ridgeline, it is going to be absolutely formidable. However, when we compare the Type 5 Heavy to the E100, we find out that its DPM is 10% worse, which means that it will take a while for the Type 5 Heavy to take out its opponents, although its aim time is better and its accuracy is the same. So that's quite enough theory crafting, let's get stuck into some gameplay. So here we go, we're playing in the Type 5 Heavy on Siegfried Line, and yeah, just look how much bigger we are than that T10 That it has to be played to be believed how gigantic these Japanese heavy tanks, and the Tier 10 is no exception, and making that Jagdpanzer E100 look small, which is absolutely ridiculous. So as we can see here, we're not quite up to our top speed limit along the flat. We're not even going quite at 20. So I think that realistically, up until this point, we're about the same kind of top speed as the mouse. But thank goodness we finally get over the slope, and we're chugging along at 25 kilometers an hour now, which this tank doesn't feel that slow, especially in a city environment. So we're going to get into position here, and hopefully try and pick apart our opponents through side scraping. We're going to see if we can practice some side scraping in this vehicle. This IS-7 seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We put a meaty round, 657 damage through the side of that Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank. It doesn't seem like he can quite figure out who to engage right now. He's got a Japanese tank to the left of him, a Japanese tank to the right. and he's losing his health rather quickly indeed. Fair enough, this vehicle doesn't have the best rate of fire, but I'm quite enjoying this 600 alpha damage. It's not quite as slow as the E100, but not quite as fast as a mouse. Look at this T10 E5 next to me. Absolutely ridiculous. It really does look like a baby toy tank next to us. But then again, this thing does look ridiculously silly as well. No parking indeed. So one thing that I've been learning in this tank is that side scraping sometimes isn't the best, and you're best to actually come around the front. That Type 5 Heavy was not angling his armor correctly. And so we were able to go through the side, but he was able to go through the front of the turret. Remember, this part is 280, this mantlet here is 280, and these cheeks are 260. And so when people are firing these premium rounds, as they do on the test server, that have got like 282 millimeters of penetration, that means that your 262 millimeters of cheek armor are quite, well, vulnerable indeed. So we're trying to hit this AFK Type 5 Heavy here. But check out his armor. It doesn't actually look like he's AFK, he's turning his turret. But even the side armor there, which I thought we were going to be able to go through, we're not quite able to engage. So we're not quite tall enough to get over the FV215B183. But we do finally manage to finish off the Type 5 Heavy, as the FV215B183 in front of me wilts away. So again, check out the mobility of this tank. I feel like it's just about a little bit faster than the mouse. But as we mentioned, the specific power of this tank really is the letdown. But when you've got it on hard surfaces like this, it doesn't feel nearly as slow as when you've got it off-road. Right through the side armor there of the Type 5 Heavy, and he bounces off us. Let's see if we can bully him a bit before we finish him off. And when he exposes the side of his turret like that, that's an easy penetrating shot for us, as we roll for over 600 to finish him off. Now, I found it very, very tricky to get meaningful test server footage. It feels like everyone who's playing at Tier 10 is either playing in an FV215B183 and firing Hesh rounds, or they're playing in a Jagdpanzer E100 or a Waffenträger Alpha E100 and firing premium rounds. And it's very tricky to actually test what kind of armor this Type 4 or Type 5 Heavy is going to have when, you know, it meets those Tier 8s and Tier 9s, which are pretty much, you know, a third or two-thirds of the matchup. So let me show you what we can do in a Type 4 Heavy, which has pretty much exactly the same armor profile as the Tier 10 Japanese heavy tank, apart from it has 10 millimeters less of armor. So if anything, our armor is going to be better when we're using the Tier 10, where we're engaging the C75. So we've already bounced 2 of his rounds, and we've put 2 into him. Now, the rate of fire on the Type 4 is rather low indeed. However, we're still managing to take him down slowly but surely, and if we were playing the Type 5, we would have probably already had a chance to finish him off. Because of the nature of the test server, it's been very, very, very hard for me to get you meaningful footage for the Type 5 Heavy. Everyone's playing hyper-aggressively, which, you know, your slow but steady tanks really don't like. Everyone's firing premium rounds, so it's very hard to gauge whether the armor is failing because you're not angling it properly, or 2, because they're just YOLOing in some premium rounds into your hull. And 3, there are hardly any Tier 8 or Tier 9 tanks. Everyone's playing your Waffenträger Alpha E100, your FV215B183 firing Hesh rounds, and also there's usually about 3 to 5 artillery in every single game. And so stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to try and rush towards getting the Type 4 and Type 5 Heavies, and then I'll be able to not only theorize but demonstrate the armor capabilities. But I don't really need to demonstrate them to know what is going to be the upper limits of the armor of the Type 4 and Type 5 Heavies. If you don't angle the armor, anyone that really gets a 300mm penetration premium round is going to be able to go through your lower plate reliably, or your mid plate. However, if you angle your armor, it's only going to be the super high penetration rounds, like the Tier 10 Tank Destroyers premium rounds that get 375mm of penetration, that is going to be able to go through your armor reliably. And so what I found is that the Type 5 Heavy's armor is certainly better than the E100's. But I don't think it's as all-round as good as the mouse. And the main reason for that is it's the cheeks. It's the cheeks of the Type 5. It's the fact that when you do angle your armor in a mouse, you'd be thinking, ho ho ho, there's no way you're getting through me now. It's this gigantic area on the Type 5 Heavy that's your key to taking it out effectively. And so I guess that's a good thing for mouse drivers out there. You don't want to have a tank that's effectively got a better gun than you, that's slightly more mobile than you, also having better armor than you. And so the mouse certainly still has that going for it. For the E100, however, I feel like there is a tank that is going to have better armor than you, that has maybe just about the same kind of mobility as you, maybe a little bit worse. But certainly this 140mm gun is not as impressive as the gun on the E100, especially if you're firing premium ammunition. And so I think that puts the Type 5 Heavy in a really good spot. It's sort of in between the mouse and the E100. And as far as we did on this game on Siegfried Line, well, we picked up 5,000 damage very quickly indeed. So I think the Type 5 Heavy will be a fan favorite, if only for the fact that it's an absolutely gigantic tank. I think that it's a tank that is going to be a very, very, very strong in a good matchup. As long as the enemies are unable to get your side armor, you're practically impenetrable from any tier 8 tanks, even if they're firing premium rounds. It's only really some tier 9 tanks that you have to start worrying about when they're firing premium rounds at you. And you have to be ultra careful against tier 10 tank destroyers. But apart from that, the enemy are pretty easy pickings for this vehicle. But remember, this vehicle is rather slow indeed. It lumbers towards you, and so you have ample opportunity to simply get out the way, outflank it, and hopefully nail its weak side armor. I don't think that the Type 5 Heavy is going to be an overpowered vehicle outside of a very good matchup indeed. A lot like what an E100 and a mouse does, but the amount of situations that you get where you have that mouse against those low-tiered opponents, it doesn't seem to happen that often. And so whether or not you choose to rush to pick up this tier 10 Japanese heavy tank is going to be up to you. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if you want to see an overview of all of the Japanese heavy tanks, then simply click up here and you can go to see the branch starting from the bottom and ending up at the top. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Type 5 Heavy. Do you think that the cupola weakness on top and also these cheeks on the side are going to make this vehicle have too much vulnerability? Or do you think the combination of just all-round hugely thick armor with a 140mm gun is going to make this thing a bit like another E100? But anyway, as always guys, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.